Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar. The AI revolution is coming to every stage of your buyer's journey. Presented by Conversica and MarTech Today. I'm your host, Cynthia Ramsaran. Before we get started, here are some helpful viewing tips. You can customize any of the windows for your viewing experience. And if you have any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A box at any time to communicate with us. You can also type in questions for the speakers about their presentation at any time. Without further ado, let's get to the presentation. Rashmi Vittal is the Chief Marketing Officer at Conversica, and Amanda DePaul is Senior Director of Demand Generation and Integrated Marketing at Conversica. Now I'll turn things over to Rashmi.
Thanks, Cynthia, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. Amanda and I are thrilled to be talking to you about this really cool topic. So what are we going to be covering today? Well, we're going to be talking about some common performance struggles that we see when we talk to our customers across the customer lifecycle and why they happen. And then how you can think of using new innovative technologies like conversational AI to increase engagement throughout the buying cycle. And then we're going to walk through some examples of conversational AI in the wild. So really excited to get going here. But first, let's talk about some of the common performance struggles that many organizations face, right? And so, whoever you are, right, whatever industry you're in, a lot of companies have some parts of their customer lifecycle, from awareness to consideration, retention, and advocacy, where they are underperforming, right? And underperforming in your customer lifecycle will translate into major inefficiencies. It could even translate into higher workforce costs. And then ultimately, this can lead to missed revenue opportunities. Right. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean by that, right? So if we think about the kind of the marketing department, right, we see many companies struggle to drive engagement at the top of the funnel, and really at that top of the funnel to attract higher quality leads, right? Think about the different points at the top of the funnel that lead to unengaged, unnoticed, or untouched leads, resulting in poor performance or your KPI simply just not being hit, right? Let's take a couple of examples here. What about unengaged target audience on your website? Visitors who really show up onto your homepage but don't get past your homepage because they can't really find the information that they're looking for, or they can't connect to somebody to help them answer any kind of questions. And think another thing about remarketing to inactive leads. A lot of times as we're going through the process, there were signals of some interest, but then now that nurture is not enough and they've gone cold, right? They've been deactivated. How do you re-engage them? How are you marketing to them today, right? There's a lot of opportunities there that we're simply not tapping into. And then lastly, especially now that we're solidly in a digital first foot, right? Everything now has to be thought about through the digital buyer's journey. What percentage of your spend is on webinars or virtual events, right? And you think about that spend investment, how well are you driving attendance to these types of programs? And then how well are you following up from those programs, right? And whenever I speak to demand gen leaders or marketing operation leaders, they're frequently frustrated by these different aspects of where their funnel is underperforming. On top of that, you got to think about the different type of ways that just even the underlying data within their systems is not to the point of cleanliness that they would like. So how can you think about innovating using innovation to drive improvement in these areas? And to talk about marketing, you then have to talk about sales. And there are real sales pain points that sales organizations face, right? And so one of the things, like if you had to put on your sales leader hat, one thing that sales leaders commonly hear from their marketing partners is whether they're actually following up on that inbound demand that's being handed over to them, right? So is that inbound demand being underworked? A lot of sales organizations today also have a sales capacity or productivity issue, right? Are they being restricted from being able to grow their sales team right now? Or in another way, are they being restricted for how to really properly drive productivity out of their sales workforce, right? And then when you think about this, oftentimes marketing and sales organizations today, especially in many mid-market and enterprise B2B marketing and sales organizations, are running some form of an account-based marketing program or strategy, right? And so how can you maintain that focus on those named accounts and do the proper prospecting, but yet you might not have time to review your inbound MQLs. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when you take the sales capacity issue, some of the sales productivity issues, the shift from going into a digital 100% virtual selling scenario, a lot of these are issues that sales organizations are struggling with, and you have to ask the question, are you still able to meet your pipeline and revenue goals, right? And then when you think also the other linchpin in terms of thinking about your underperforming customer revenue lifecycle is really also taking a look at the customer success pain points. More and more, we're seeing organizations really want to create better connective tissue between marketing, sales, and the customer success teams that are focused on not only properly onboarding customers, but ensuring that those customers are seeing value out of the investments they've made, that those customers are really know how to get full utilization out of what those investments, and then make sure that they're tapping into at the right time those opportunities to drive renewals and expansions. And really here, the issue is that customer success teams are highly leveraged teams, and they have problems delivering on that personalized customer experience in a way that drives scale, that really focuses on max utilization while making sure that they're able to deliver on the value. So here's just some issues that we see. And what this is really stemming around is the fact that, let's be honest, today a lot of these pain points is derived by the fact that we have very inconsistent customer engagement. And the idea is that, what do we mean by that? Well, today, most customer engagement is human-powered. And what we mean by this is that human-powered conversations are the conversations and the actions to qualify and manage thousands of prospects and customers, right? And we know that good customer engagement yields better revenue results. That has been proven time and time again, right? But what happens is when you have poor customer engagement, you're going to lead to poor results. And there's 4 pillars of what we call good customer engagement that we've researched actually over the past 6 years in trying to really hone in on where that human-powered customer engagement fails. In fact, we've been conducting a survey reaching out to over 1,000 accounts across multiple industries to see how well these organizations respond to different activities that are generating leads, and then the follow-up thereafter to determine if they are consistently hitting these 4 pillars. And what we find tells us that there's plenty of room to improve. And so let's break that down a little bit, right? So what are these 4 pillars? You're talking about persistence, promptness, personalization, and performance. And so when we talk about persistence, what it is, and this is a big culprit, is that there's just inconsistent execution. 65% of companies studied only reach out up to 2 times. 2 times. 65% of companies only reach out up to 2 times. When we know today it takes up to 11 to 15 touches to drive to true engagement, especially now during these times, right? So right there, you can see inconsistent execution on that persistence is an issue. Second is promptness, and it's really slow response times. Right? 55% of companies took 9 hours or longer to respond to an inquiry. That is just way too long, especially when you look at many different analysts and influencers are now saying 83% of customers expect to engage with someone immediately after contacting a company, right? So their promptness, we see an issue. The third area is around personalization. And personalization, or the lack thereof, is kind of one of those things. First name and company name in a text-based outreach, whether that's email or SMS or chat, these things are table stakes, right? 70% of companies fail to personalize beyond those two elements. And personalizing emails, we say you should consistently be able to personalize emails with at least 5 elements at scale, and this is going to drive better engagement. So what are those things? It's obviously the subject line. Is if you're sending out emails, is the subject line really, powerful? Are you being able, obviously, to use the name? Is the body, that first line, that first sentence, is that body relevant to the topic at hand that is interested, that target audience is interested in? Did it actually come? Does it feel like it came from an actual persona, not some mass-produced email? And does it have some real sort of CTA? And so if it takes 10 touches or more, right, to get a response, and today whether it's your sales development team or your inside sales teams are only sending on average 2 attempts, then only 20% of your emails are being personalized, or your touches are being personalized. And what this ultimately results in is poor performance. Only 12% of companies' outreach consistently land in the primary inbox. That means they're going elsewhere. They're going into spam, they're going to promotions, they're going to social. They're not coming into your inbox where you can see them to begin with. So how can you think about, if you take that improved data plus the message quality, really can lead to better deliverability and to engagement? So how does this relate then to what we're talking about, and what kind of technology and solutions can you use today? And how can something like a conversational AI solution drive better engagement? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about, because what we've seen on average is that when organizations use conversational AI to drive better customer engagement, they see on average an increase of 15 to 25% on their engagement rates. Right, so that's really good right there. And by engagement rate, what we mean here is being able to not only open an email and click on something, but respond back. So we're getting responses back, which is very telling in terms of what's on the mind of your target audience. So how can companies utilize conversational AI solutions to drive better engagement? Well, there's kind of 3 key ways where we could do it. Let's kind of break that down. And coming back to what we were seeing on our funnel, if we took that funnel, let's break it down across the funnel where conversational AI solutions can actually make a difference. So the first one is right at the top. Let's address that top of the funnel performance. Use conversational AI. You've probably heard of the term conversational marketing. This is something that's been out for a few years. Conversational marketing is a way to support many use cases. A lot of times people think conversational marketing do you just mean website chat? In fact, it's more than just website chat, and it should be more than just website chat. And what we advocate here as we're working with our customers is that there's more opportunities to use conversational marketing across your funnel. So let's take some examples. Of course, you can engage with them on website chat, and this is a way to really drive people to connect them to the information that they're looking for on their website, or maybe capture lead information, for sure. But once you've captured that lead information, what do you want to do? Well, there are opportunities to be able to cultivate that early interest before it MQLs, right? So if you follow kind of just the standard kind of stage nomenclature of an MQL, and if you also do it where once a lead MQLs and it's handed over to sales, the idea is that what are you doing between it becoming a lead and it MQLing? Fine, you're probably running nurture programs right now, which makes total sense. You should. But if you think about nurture programs, what are they? They're literally one-directional kind of push notifications on something new or interesting about your company. You're trying to educate your audience, whether that's a white paper, whether that's, hey, come and attend a webinar. Hey, maybe it might be, this is a new case study. You're trying to push something out based on an inferred understanding of your target audience. And that could be super powerful. But on average, nurture programs only yield 1 to 3% engagement. What we've seen is that if you can actually engage with your leads in this early interest stage with a direct personalized email, where, again, hitting those 5 elements of personalization, you can now ask a lot of different either types of questions, or you can push information to them where you really want them to learn more. And so cultivating that early interest is really important. You can pre-qualify the lead, you can ask a couple of BANT questions, and you can get some response back in a way that says, is this lead or organization more in market? Is it hitting our ICP or not? Areas around, hey, we want to be able to maximize our investment in those different types of events, whether it's webinars or virtual conferences. So how can you use a personalized one-on-one conversation to drive people to those events? And then once they either they register or attend, how do you follow up with them? You know, if we go back to the promptness, we saw that on average it takes sales development teams to follow up with leads greater than 9 hours. But we know that if you could follow up within minutes of somebody attending a webinar, you can achieve far greater engagement rates by doing so, sometimes as much as 21 times greater in that. And then lastly, when you think about those aged or inactive leads, we talked about this. You know, you can use conversational AI to remarket to them. So we know that typically your sales teams aren't going to go back after this. We know that email nurture is not enough to revive them. You may have ended your nurture program. This is a really great way to be able to re-stimulate those inactive leads to see if they are back in market. On the sales side, if we talk through this a little bit more, people might say, oh, okay, I'm just going to qualify my inbound MQLs. For sure. You know, we see a different scattering of companies. And what we've seen over time is that companies really, like the sales development teams, are really only touching inbound MQLs, probably anywhere I've seen as low as 3%, all the way up to maybe about 20 or 30% of their inbound MQLs. These are MQLs. These are MQLs that marketing has said, I'm going to hand them over to sales. Well, what's happening to the rest of that 70% of MQLs? How are they being worked? Of course, you're running them through nurture, but we know you're only getting a 1 to 3% engagement back. How can you better qualify that inbound demand to see if there's anything that's actually sales ready earlier and faster in the cycle? This is conversational sales use cases are great for trying to do exactly this. But then it expands beyond that, right? What if you have leads that have come, asked for maybe a demo or said, contact us, your sales development rep follows up, but then receives no response back, right? What will happen? Your sales development rep will probably do this a handful of times, and then they'll move on to the next set of leads or prospects that they're supposed to be working with. Well, in this instance, great opportunity to pass this off to a conversational AI solution, let it be able to follow up and then determine if they're really interested in scheduling that meeting with the sales rep. And then other opportunities as well that people don't often think about. You know, in today's day and age, especially if you have alumni of your product and they move on to either a new company or they're still with your company, with the existing company as they were a customer, and they used to be a customer, but they're no longer a customer, it's really good opportunity to reach back out to them and see if they're still interested. And then across all of these use cases, how many times have you seen the response come back where the prospect might say something like, now is not a good time, contact me next quarter, or I'm on maternity leave, I'm coming back at X and X date. Well, typically this is yet another area where human error can come in, where the reminder is not placed in the CRM system or the sales rep forgets to jot it down. Well, when you use an AI assistant through a conversational AI solution, you can it will remember, it will not forget. And so whenever that quarter shows up or that date shows up, it will reach back out and make sure to re-engage with that prospect. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're really talking about here is how can you scale your sales force if they're met with these sales capacity challenges, or frankly, they're just not working the leads to their fullest. That results in being able to do what? Really book more meetings, so qualify opportunities, book those meetings, and ultimately build that healthier pipeline that will lead to being able to better hit your revenue targets. And then let's talk about, customer success. We all as an organization, whether we're marketing leaders, sales leaders, and customer success leaders, need to think about not only successfully onboarding our customers, but then retaining them and then growing their value. That's really kind of the force multiplier within our organizations. And more marketing teams are working more closely with customer success teams to drive customer growth marketing initiatives. One of the key ways, as you're thinking about some of these really cool, creative, growth marketing initiatives, there are some underlying tasks that are just tedious for a lot of the customer success teams to keep up with. What that is really around, how can I schedule the right account reviews at the right time with my various customer accounts? This becomes problematic when customer success teams are highly leveraged. On average, if you think about, let's just take a step back and think about if you are even in the technology sector and you have a customer success team, oftentimes they're highly leveraged. They have 50-to-1 or 100-to-1 account to rep ratios, where it could be a smattering of different types of accounts that a customer success rep is serving. Even outside of the technology industry, we see sometimes those organizations are called account management. Oftentimes there are, again, these really highly leveraged account managers who have a number of accounts per rep. How are they feasibly supposed to create very personalized touches to their accounts on a regular basis when they have so many accounts to administer? So it becomes really hard. Conversational AI is a great way to instantaneously provide those personalized touches to do a number of things. Yes, you could onboard new customers with a very warm welcome message, and then kind of next steps of what is going to be coming next. You can schedule those account reviews that are really critical in driving that customer health, right? Conversational AI solutions are great at being able to begin or maybe even kick off renewal programs for key clusters of your accounts so that that's top of mind, right? So no longer waiting, maybe just only 60 days before. Hey, let's maybe start that process 90 days before or even sooner so that we can make sure there's plenty of time to evaluate and get us to that proper renewal cycle. And then here's another interesting thing is that when you send those emails out to drive customer feedback, and especially if you're an account rep or a customer service rep that's formulated has formed a good relationship with your accounts, one of the things that's hard for some accounts to do is to give critical feedback back. What we've seen across our customer base is that when they use an AI assistant to specifically reach out for collecting customer feedback, those accounts are more likely to be authentic in their responses because they don't want to hurt the feelings, because they know they're not going to hurt the feelings of the AI assistant that's reaching out. So that's a good way to get more authentic answers back. And then obviously there's always the opportunity to reach out to drive better product utilization. Hey, there could be new features that are coming out. There could be a new offering that you have or a new service. How can you drive some of those promotional activities in a personalized way to see if your customers might be able to take advantage of that? And so here are just 3 really cool examples of how you can use conversational AI solution or ways to think about using conversational AI solutions to try and drive better performance out of your customer lifecycle. And I think if you think about putting it all together, how would this actually look in your kind of in your lead engagement and follow-up process? And so how to think about it is simply around, especially in your lead engagement process, right? When you think about where conversational marketing and conversational sales can fit, really, let's look at that buyer's journey again. In the awareness stage, a lot of people are very comfortable with using website chat on your website. Some people consider that conversational marketing, totally fine. But let's talk about where that expanded use cases go. Conversational marketing, if we think about those pre-MQLs, would be that scenario where maybe it's feeding right off of your marketing automation platform. You have leads that haven't quite hit that MQL threshold. Go ahead and use conversational marketing right off of your marketing automation platform. You could also have it run off your CRM if you push pre-MQLs into your CRM, but having it come off your marketing automation tool is probably the most common place that we've seen it. Next, as they become MQLs, obviously there's going to be a set of what, your choice MQLs, your high quality MQLs, maybe your A MQLs, maybe your tier 1 MQLs, however you bucket it. That's going to go to your sales team, right? And your SDR team is probably going to follow up. Now, your SDR team, there's a bunch of tools that they can use. Not only human power, which is them writing the emails, sending, putting out those social messages or getting on the phone, but they also use sales engagement tools like Sales Loft, Groove, or Outreach, or pick one. There's a handful of them. But this is also an opportunity where, again, if you need to, and if there's a sales capacity issue, you can most certainly use Conversica in this regard as well. But the area I want to focus on is more up at the top, on the other MQLs. Remember that 70% of MQLs are just not getting worked properly by your sales team. This is really where conversational sales can really come in. Why? Because it is really engaging with that inbound MQL to qualify and determine if it's ready to have a meeting with your sales team. And so that's a really good way to do it. If there is a hand raiser and they're saying we do want to schedule a meeting, the conversational sales assistant will be able to set up that meeting and then pass it on to the sales rep. And then as you think about it, if they're not sales ready or there's no response, you can just kick it right back into your nurture program. And hey, what happens when your nurture program, and let's say there is some additional content engagement off your nurture program that re-triggers or re-MQLs? Well, oftentimes, what would you do? You would probably pass that back to your SDR team, but once again, you know that that's not going to get as worked as well as it should. Instead of passing on to your SDR team, pass it over to the AI assistant for it to be able to run to engage in that lead follow-up. If it gets a response back that says, hey, let's schedule a meeting, go ahead and schedule it and push it off to your sales folks. The other way you can see it, if after the nurture program, the lead becomes inactive again, there's been no engagement greater than, 90, 120, whatever your timeline is, use the conversational marketing to re-engage with those leads, because those are now properly sitting in the marketing, in kind of marketing's bucket. And so this is just a real simple way to see how you can use conversational AI solutions across your lead engagement process. Another interesting thing that we see here as a result of it, it really drives sales workforce productivity quite a bit, right? And immediately augments those sales teams so they can handle not only the inbound, but also have a way to make sure those outbound prospects are not slipping through the cracks. So I've just taken the time to explain to you what conversational AI use cases there are, where it might fit in your lead engagement process, but nothing is better than actually seeing what these actual conversations look like in some of these key use cases. So this time I'm going to hand it over to Amanda, and she's going to take you through some pretty cool examples. Amanda?
Cool. Thanks, Rashmi. I think you touched on a lot of the things we're going to talk about as far as real examples go. So I decided to put together 3 examples of how we at Conversica drink our own Kool-Aid and use our own AI assistants in a lot of our programs. And we actually do see greater engagement and a lot faster time to MQL by employing some of these programs. So let's talk about how operationally you could set some of this stuff up. One of the biggest charges at Conversica right now is ABM. We work really closely with sales to, get traction in our key accounts. And we use our IVAs or our AI assistants to help us do that. Obviously, marketing is always running, programs at the top as far as, webinars and content syndication and display advertising. And that kind of keeps the lights on and keeps all these accounts warm and kind of moving along in their research journey before they actually even get to a salesperson. Sales is responsible for conducting outbound outreach that entire time, right? So we prioritize our accounts so that at least they've got kind of a small pool to work against, but then it's their job to be multi-threaded within the account and highly personalized in their outreach to key contacts within that account. All the while, marketing is kind of listening for any kind of hand raise, even outside of something like a form fill or something like that. We're looking for engagement with an ad. We're looking for website visits. We're looking for engagement with an email. Even if that activity is somewhat anonymous, there's a way for us to still use our AI assistants to help get traction in that account for sales. So do sort of a tag team. So while we're listening, at any point in time when we do measure some kind of activity by way of one of our ABM platform, we kick that account into a AI assistant program, and the AI assistant takes over and says, okay, I'm going to reach out to these contacts that you've qualified for me to go reach out to. Maybe we only pick a certain number of or a certain persona or something like that to kick into the AI assistant campaign. And then that AI assistant just kind of carries that conversation for sales. So this could go a couple ways. Either sales has already finished with their outreach and they've kind of been like, well, I didn't get a hold of these guys. I didn't get enough traction. And the AI assistant has now picked that back up because marketing has measured some sort of engagement somewhere in the funnel. Or the AI assistant is tag teaming with sales, and maybe sales has them in some kind of cadence or an outreach plan, but the next touch isn't for another 5 or 6 days. The AI assistant reaches out as soon as it measures that engagement and says, hey, heard you were interested, or what can I help you with, or whatever you want that AI assistant to say. So it can go both ways, right? Sales can definitely have some control over the situation where they're taking their key contacts and tagging them for follow-up with the AI assistant, or marketing can build some automation around, how do we determine what accounts do warrant some kind of more personalized follow-up versus the ones that can still kind of stay in this always-on sort of marketing campaign strategy that we have running against all of our target accounts. So this is something, we do see an uptick in engagement in the way of responses for these accounts, and versus just allowing sales to kind of like do it on their own, or allowing sales to be the kind of manual trigger in doing outreach when we flag an account for follow-up. That timing really matters. And so we do see an uptick in engagement in the way of responses from our accounts when we put them in our AI assistant programs. So that's one way to use our AI assistants. Another way, you heard Rashmi talk about virtual events and the amount of spend that a lot of companies put into virtual events and webinars, especially right now. Events have obviously changed significantly. I think we're in this virtual event world for some time still going forward. And not only has, the format of an event changed, but what you get after an event as a marketer has completely changed as well. I was surprised as a demand gen leader when we started doing virtual events that we were getting the entire list of everyone who registered, regardless of if they came to the event or not, regardless of if they stopped by our booth. And that's not how it usually works in trade show land. Usually you're kind of stuck with whatever you get from your little scanner in your booth. So we're ending up with these giant lead lists, which are great, but aren't necessarily engaged at all. And so we're really almost treating these like they're outbounds again. And so what we do is we use our IVA or our AI assistant to try to get some traction in especially the leads that didn't necessarily come by our booth or didn't necessarily come to our speaking session. So we will stick everyone into kind of like a marketing automation type nurture program. And we're triggering that HTML outreach because I think that is still really important to get your brand in front of your audience, to get your content in front of your audience. It's really kind of your introduction, especially when it's a cold list and maybe these people aren't familiar with your brand at all. But we're still listening for engagement in those campaigns in some capacity. So again, maybe they're in a LinkedIn retargeting campaign and we're targeting them with display ads and we're sending them emails. We're listening for any kind of engagement in the way of a click or something like that to say, oh, somebody's alive over there. It's a real person. So I'm going to go ahead and kick them over to the AI assistant to do an outreach to say, hey, thanks for coming to the event. Sorry we missed you, but are you interested in X, Y, and Z based on whatever the content was that they engaged with? So it's a nice way to get a little bit more out of your virtual event list beyond just relying on the people who may have come to your session or swung by your virtual booth, which I don't know about you guys, but we don't get a ton of virtual booth traffic. I think people are too busy listening to the sessions. So this is a good way to kind of get traction on leads that may not be familiar with you in the first place. What we do end up doing with our event leads is, even if they don't, fast track themselves essentially by engaging with our marketing content in some way and then getting passed to the AI assistant, we do still hand them off to the AI assistant after a certain number of days for kind of a soft touch outreach. So we don't really want to waste our SDR's time with reaching out to every single one of these, sometimes thousands of people, asking them about their interest. We have the AI assistant do it for them. And then the AI assistant sort of acts as an SDR for the SDRs because she's qualifying leads' interest and then handing them off to the SDR for real human follow-up. So it's kind of like you get a couple different paths here. And we do this with a lot of our different programs where we say, okay, anything in the way of engagement is going to trigger sort of a fast track loop for these leads, and we're going to hand them directly to the AI assistant, or we're going to give the ones that maybe aren't quite ready for even an AI assistant follow-up a little more time to get familiar with our brand, familiar with our content, and understand what we do before we then hand them off to the AI assistant and ultimately hand them off to the SDR. So a few different ways you could go with your event list, but I definitely suggest putting more touches on those event lists than you would maybe think about doing in the olden days of trade shows where you're relying on interest prior to even putting them into your database in the way of a booth visit or something like that. So we'll talk about one more here. So, of course, everyone's got a bucket of sleepyheads in their database. These are the leads that you have reached out to a million times, and maybe they're still clicking on stuff on your website. They're still tooling around. They're there, but they're not engaging with you. These are super frustrating for the SDR team, I think, because what ends up happening is marketing keeps saying, hey, this is an MQL, and then 45 days go by, nobody responds, and then they MQL again, and marketing is like, hey, this is an MQL, and sales is like, man, I have reached out to this so many times. There's no way I'm going to get a hold of this person. These are perfect. These are a perfect pool for the AI assistant to reach out to. So again, we're kind of doing this this sort of revival campaign where, say, I put a bunch of my kind of colder leads into a Marketo nurture or a retargeting campaign or something like that. I'm listening for engagement, and then I trigger the AI assistant. Or in some cases, we just take the pool of leads, we kind of group them by topic, maybe, or by persona, or whatever we feel like would be a good sort of uniting force, I guess, around what the content could be in our outreach, and just kind of putting them in that campaign and seeing what happens. There's nothing wrong with jumping the gun, I think, when you're talking about quiet leads, especially when they've been MQLing over and over again and you can't figure out why they're not responding. Another thing that we could do with these sleepyhead campaigns is take those accounts and almost treat it like an outbound ABM campaign, where you're saying, okay, this one person has MQL'd a million times, but they're not responding. So I'm going to take this other marketing person in this account, stick them in this revival campaign, and see if they, wake up in some capacity. So there's a lot of things you can do, and it's nice that marketing can have a little bit of control over how the follow-up happens and what the follow-up says and how fast the follow-up can happen. And then sales is a lot happier because there's none of that sales and marketing strife with, why aren't you following up with my leads? And also they get to just have more conversations with real people, which is what sales wants to do at the end of the day. They want to be talking to people, building relationships, selling the solution. They don't want to be writing emails and doing a bunch of administrative work, to send emails to people and make calls. So anything that marketing can do to help, I think it builds a better relationship between sales and marketing, and also is just going to help you hit your pipeline and your revenue goals at the end of the day. So one question that I get a lot is, why can't I just build this myself? Why can't I just put this into a marketing automation system and I'll write a bunch of emails and I'll stick everybody in there and it'll be great? First of all, Godspeed, if that's what you want to do, if you have the time to be sitting around writing a bunch of emails for every single event and every single webinar and every single everything that you do. I know we don't have time to do that. So that's one aspect. This is kind of a set it up and let it fly sort of solution. So as long as I've given the AI assistant the context as far as, it was this event name or this piece of content's name, she kind of runs with it and I don't have to worry about it. But the biggest piece is if you're sticking leads into sort of like a manual version of this, somebody still has to process any kind of response that you get. And sometimes those responses aren't positive. Sometimes it's people saying no thanks or take me off your list or whatever. There's still a person who has to sort of intervene there and do something with that. Or maybe they ask questions. A person still has to field those questions. And so the nice thing about using conversational AI is the AI assistant can kind of take it a little bit further than if you had just like sent somebody an email and then passed it off to sales, whatever that response is. So you're still eliminating a lot of busy work for sales by using an AI assistant to do your follow-up and kind of do some pre-qualification for your leads before you're actually handing them off to a real salesperson. So what does that actually result in? We kind of touched on our 4 Ps, our persistence, promptness, personalization, and performance, which say that 10 times fast. And all of the kind of improvement that you can see across all of our 4 Ps by employing an AI assistant. So you do get those 11 to 15 unique attempts without begging sales to do it. You are getting prompt follow-up because that follow-up can happen in an instant. It can happen as soon as there's an engagement or as soon as there's a hand raise. And your time to follow-up goes from 9 hours, I think it was, to 5 minutes. Personalization. So, you saw on some of those examples, you're able to still insert some personalized information into that outreach. And additionally, the AI assistant is still going to address the person as a person, still going to know what company the person's at. So it can kind of help you with some of that personalization as well. And lastly is performance. I mean, a lot of this is 100% automated once you've set it up. And also we see that our outreach is delivered to the proper inbox more times than not, which I think is a really big problem for a lot of companies now with especially like Gmail doing these kind of multiple different inboxes trying to help their customers prioritize. So, by using an AI assistant, you're taking a lot of the busy work out of not only your day-to-day, but sales and customer success's day-to-day, and you're improving performance in the long run, which we all know is going to result in a lot better funnel performance across the board. So, and lastly, a better experience, I think, for your customers because they're getting the outreach that they want, they're getting meaningful outreach, and it's not this kind of spray and pray situation that I think a lot of companies are trapped in. So hand it back to Rashmi to wrap us up here. But I think that I think the use cases are kind of endless. It's just kind of how creative you are. And, happy to answer any questions down the road if anybody has any, hey, could I do this? Is this possible? I think anything's possible. So Rashmi?
Yeah, for sure. And, it's really interesting. So, Amanda, that was great. I mean, you took us through 3 really powerful examples that really show how you can create that force multiplier productivity against your leads at different stages of the funnel. And so really what we've talked about here today is, look, we know that inconsistent customer engagement results in an underperforming customer lifecycle. You have solutions in place that can help you elevate the performance of your customer lifecycle and make sure that your investments, especially in your marketing programs, is generating that demand is not going to waste. Conversational marketing is more than just a chatbot. It is actually, and it offers marketers the ability to continue the conversations between major engagements and especially across different communication channels. Website chat is one form of communication, right? Conversational AI solutions, and you saw our AI assistants do, is be able to communicate not only over website chat, but it can also do it over email and actually SMS, right? And the notion here is that conversational AI is going to be part of every piece of your buyer's journey. It is happening already where we're seeing that. It's just going to continue to get proliferated because to that point, we really value people and people value doing creative things. And so as people are used in more creative ways and building those trusted relationships, being advisors to their customers, solving those complex problems, you can push some of those repetitive, routine, and menial tasks off to automation, and conversational AI is a great way to do that. So with that, I think we're now open to running the Q&A portion of this webinar. So Cynthia, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. Yeah, we have a couple of questions, and the first one is from Tiago, and I think, Rashmi, this is for you. How does Conversica deal with foreign languages?
Yeah, great question. So so Conversica specifically and our AI assistants can speak on multiple languages. We offer 6 languages today. And what typically happens is that there's usually a language of origin, just as you would imagine an employee would have, where they would naturally speak in one language, but then as somebody responds in a different language, can interpret that response. And so there is some level of bilingual capability, but really what it is just like you would think of your employee, like you might have an employee that's focused on or a sales team that's focused in Europe. You're going to have people who can be equipped to handling those languages in Europe, just as you would have people in US or English speaking languages. You'd have those folks set up in region as well. So I'm definitely able to handle multiple languages across the different regions.
Great, thank you. We have another question from John, who says it was an awesome presentation. And his question is, how do you handle specific requests for information in an automated response?
So I can kind of take that one, and Rashmi, maybe you can chime in as well. I think, at a certain point, if it's a really specific question or if it's a really specific request, at some point it is going to say there are mechanisms in place for an AI assistant to say, hey, I can't handle this anymore. Does somebody want to pick this up? And that all happens right in your CRM. So if something comes up for the AI assistant that maybe it doesn't know how to answer, or it's too complicated or whatever, it will flag that as a hot lead, for example. And then on the marketing side, I have operational systems in place that then auto MQL those and flag it for sales, and it does all the things to get that in their queue so that it's front and center for them. So the AI assistant is able to take things to a certain point, but if things get too specific or it's really like warranting a real conversation, which is great because that's what we want, it's going to flag it as a hot lead and then hand it off to sales to kind of take it from there. So Rashmi, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is also, for sure. That was a great explanation. I think on top of that, what I would add is look, the AI assistant is working in concert with your team. So if somebody does respond, depending how it will interpret the response, and it will determine, okay, is this person asking for a meeting? Is this person asking a question for further clarification? It knows how to interpret the nuances of that, and then alert the sales, typically, if let's say this is in a lead engagement, like a pre-sales scenario, it will alert the sales rep and either tell it, hey, this is a hot lead that's looking to schedule a meeting, or this is a lead that needs further action or a lead in review. And so what that signals to the rep is that, oh, I got to step in and I've got to do something here. And that alert will continue to go towards that rep until it's processed. And what will also happen as well is if, let's say this is working within your CRM, the sales rep who this lead or the account is assigned to can see within their CRM solution, let's say, the actual conversation and the engagement that's happening between the AI assistant and the lead. And so there's nothing that is, kind of not surfaced or transparent in that engagement as well. And there's an opportunity for the sales rep to even respond on behalf of the AI assistant if you feel like that trusted relationship is getting built between the AI assistant and the lead as well.
Great. The next question is from Christy, and she wants to know, how long does it take to implement the steps and identifiers for targeting?
So I think there's probably 2 parts to that question, Christy, if I can break it down. One is, I think part of your question might be, how long does it take to even kind of set something like this up? And then the second part of the question is, where do I start? Like, how do I start thinking about where to implement this first? I'll handle the first part, and then Amanda, you can handle the second part. But first part is, so what's really neat, and not all conversational AI solutions are created equal. What we've done here at Conversa is spent a lot of time investing in creating pre-built solutions that are really easy to deploy. So we can get an AI assistant with the specific skills and conversations that you're asking. So addressing the specific, whether they're conversational marketing use cases or conversational sales use cases, we can get that up and running in just a matter of weeks. So a couple weeks to get up and running really fast. There's no manual, there's no coding, there's no writing of scripts, there's no workflow creation you have to do. It's already pre-built. It's just about saying, hey, what use cases do I want to tackle first? And then what do I want to point the AI assistant to? And I think a little bit to what we were talking about is I'd kind of point back to the pain points that are causing you the most trouble in your underperforming buyer's journey. And so look at those first and then say, okay, who do I want to target? And then how do I want to set this up so that I'm driving engagement to that target audience? Amanda, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's very use case centric, I think, when you think about where you want to start and then how you would actually start. So rather than thinking about, okay, I need to touch as many of my leads as possible, or I need to, save sales or save customer success, I would think more about what is the outcome that I'm trying to get to. So maybe it's supplying more qualified leads for sales. Okay, well, I'm going to use this play and I'm going to set up this kind of one campaign and start there. I would definitely bite off little bits and kind of see how things perform. And then that way, the next time you're implementing something else, you've learned something and you can do it a little bit more meaningful way. So definitely think about it as like a use case, what outcomes based plan, rather than just trying to like tackle your entire funnel all at once and make everything optimized.
Great. Thanks, both of you. Our next question is, how much control do you have over what the AI assistant says?
Yeah, so I can take this one. When you set up your AI assistant, so you have actually quite a bit of control depending on the conversation that you choose. You can keep it super simple with some of our conversations. They're very straightforward. You don't have to do a lot of personalization in the way of inputting anything, or you choose one of the more, I guess, complicated questions and add some more personalization in there. So you could customize, I mentioned what the event name was. Like, it's always important to reference whatever the lead actually did. So maybe we're going to input the name of the event in our event follow-up, or we're going to input the actual activity that they did. So maybe they attended a speaking session. So we'll input that. So you do have some control over what the AI is actually saying, especially in the early follow-ups, because you want it to set off in the right direction and definitely reference the most recent thing that they did. So I think it's kind of up to you how much you want to be customizing, but it totally depends on the conversation that you're using.
Yeah, and what I would add to that too is that you can see very clearly, we have a tool called the Conversation Editor. You can see very clearly what the exchange is going to be that the AI assistant is going to take with each of the touches. And kind of it's more of the outline or the skeleton of that conversation. Also know that, every attempt that the AI assistant does is a different, unique attempt, and it truly is. This is a conversational AI platform. It is able to model conversations based on the core key conversation use case that you've assigned it to. So it will always stay within the boundaries of that use case, but it will deliver a level of personalization with each attempt and a level of uniqueness with each attempt. So it really gives it that very human-like, authentic feel. And if you see any of our conversation exchanges, you'll actually see that when the people are responding back, they really have no idea that it's not a human. The way that they're responding back, you can sense that they think this is a person. So that just gives you an idea just about how authentic these conversations are. And then at any point in time, if let's say the AI assistant is on its exchange and you as a rep or an administrator want to stop the AI assistant, you can. It's very easy to stop. Also, anytime a lead or a contact is responding back and they say stop or do not contact or whatever, the AI assistant stops. So there are a lot of mechanisms in place to ensure that whether the request is coming from the prospect or the sales rep or the rep is starting to intervene, the AI assistant will stop.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question. Could you use this for outbound and or ABM programs?
Yeah, so I think, we kind of touched on that as one of the use cases. I think that there are a lot of opportunities for marketing and sales to work together to use AI assistants for outbound and ABM. I will say, I'm kind of in the camp that, we never suggest this, to just load up a bunch of cold leads into an AI assistant campaign and say, go for it. Because you wouldn't do that with your sales team either. You wouldn't do that with your marketing automation platform either. So the same rules apply, I think, for the using an AI assistant for outbound. What we usually do is we've either warmed them up with some marketing outreach or a retargeting campaign or something like that, or sales has done a lot of their own outreach first to key contacts, and then they're in control of actually placing that contact into an AI assistant campaign whenever they're ready to kind of hand it off and have her continue to try to get a hold of people. So I definitely do not suggest doing like a list upload and turning the AI assistant loose. I think you're going to be sorely disappointed in performance, but I think it is a great kind of next step or a great support system for marketing and sales in their efforts to get traction in accounts. So it's definitely a tag team when you're doing it like that.
Okay, I think we can squeeze in one more question. What part of the buyer's journey is the best place to start with something like this?
Rashmi?
So yeah, this is one of those things. Like, it's a great question. Like, it comes back to what is the business problem you're trying to solve, right? Again, and it's only because we see this across our customer base. You might come back and say, yeah, we generate a lot of MQLs that we just believe fundamentally are getting underworked, and we think we're leaving a lot of money on the table. Well, if you do, use an AI assistant to follow up with that inbound demand. And that's probably where most of our use cases start. But more so what I'm seeing, because we are in this kind of digital first world and content marketing is king, there's a lot of quality content that's coming out. And so what's happening is that you're getting a lot more signals earlier in the funnel. And what you might want to do is, based on those signals, say, hey, maybe I want to kind of engage more directly in a personalized one-to-one manner to drive, to see if they're actually pre-qualified to even talk to sales, right? And what this does is that it also can help think about, maybe I could accelerate my sales cycle a little bit. Maybe I could accelerate how these leads are going through the funnel a little bit. So there's something like that. And then you heard, the 3 use cases you saw Amanda walk through are really it. With kind of thinking about first places to start. When you think about how much investment in events are being done today, again, it comes back to that. Are you making sure that you're able to squeeze out and maximize every dollar that you're putting into your marketing programs and having that turn into real healthy pipeline? So there's I think these areas that you would really want to focus in on.
Okay, thanks, Rashmi. Thanks, Amanda. That is all the time that we have today. And thanks again to both of you, Rashmi and Amanda, for this engaging discussion. If we didn't get to your question, we will be sure to pass it along to Conversica. On behalf of MarTech Today, I want to thank everyone in our audience for attending this webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.